Welcome to Goldfish on Games. We started Amstrad month with the first CPC, the 464, and we're going to end it with the last, the GX4000, a machine that formed part of the newly created Plus line of computers, which was when Amstrad finally decided to upgrade the CPC. At the top end of this range was the 6128 Plus, which had a pitiful 128KB of RAM and a floppy disk drive. At the mid-range, we had the 464 Plus, which had an even woeful 64KB of RAM and a cassette deck, but at the bottom was the GX4000, and it was possibly the least lived console of all time. It was launched in September of 1990 and it was dead by February of 1991. That's right, just 5 months on the market. So let's take a closer look at this flop. And as I was lucky to get this machine boxed, let's take a look at what we got. And on top is the manual, which might be useful later. But inside we get the console itself, which is rumoured that the case, in typical Amstrad fashion, was designed before the machine itself. We also get a loose copy of the pack entitled Burning Rubber. It really would have been nice if they could have given us a proper box for it, you know? And 2 controllers, which they confusingly call paddle controllers. Personally, whenever I think of paddles, I think of the controllers for the Atari 2600 and Pong. We also get a power brick, and last but not least, a SCART cable. On the outside of the machine we can find its power button, its cartridge slot, and the pause button, which interestingly maps to the letter P on the keyboard, as most games of the time used that letter if there were a computer game. Now let's take a closer look at what's powering this thing. The Plus line didn't introduce as many upgrades to the standard design as you might expect or hope for. The CPU is still a Z80 running at about 4MHz, though the GX4000 is clocked slightly slower for improved video quality. It has the lower end 64KB of RAM, and the sound chip is still the same AY3-8912, but there were now 3 DMA channels to push data to the chip. Now this didn't magically give the sound chip the ability to do sample sound effects or anything like that. It did mean developers could send data to the chip with less CPU overhead, and in theory could result in more complex sound effects or music. But it really was the chip that handled graphics that received the most attention. The system palette was increased to 4096 colours, and developers could now draw 32 colours to the screen at once. It also gained support for 16 hardware sprites that were 16 by 16 pixels in size and could have 16 colours. Damn, that's a lot of 16s. Which were independent of the screen mode that it was running in. Sprites could also be drawn at their native size or magnified by 2 or 4 times by the hardware, which is a relatively unique feature for a home console of the time. Now along the front we can find 2 9-pin Amstrad standard joystick ports that supported the new 2-button controller that was launched with the Plus line. It also had an RJ11 connector for light guns, which I believe 2 games actually supported, and on top of that it has a 15-pin analog joystick port that looks like the same one that Amstrad used on their PC line. And also along the front it had the headphone jack, because why not? And if you think the front looked a bit of a mess, things didn't improve when we look round the back. We have, count them, 2 power connectors. The first one is a 5V DC barrel jack that was meant to be used in combination with the Amstrad CPC Plus monitor. The second one is an 11V DC barrel jack that you were meant to use with the provided power brick that came with the machine. Just remember, heed the warning on the front and connect them in the exact right order, or you could actually break the machine. And then we have 3 video ports. First one is a monitor connector that would go to the CPC Plus monitor. Next to it we have a SCART connector that provides both composite and RGB, and finally we have good old faithful RF. The games, at least when you could actually buy them, came in this totally hench box. With a little bit of Tetrising you can actually fit a large part of the library in one of these. I'm not even joking here. With less than 30 titles released, it's not too difficult to fit 5 or so games in one of these boxes. And just look at it next to a Mega Drive case and cart. The case is much bigger, while the cart is almost half the size. None of this makes sense. And with the machine crashing out of the market so suddenly, it seems there was many carts that were built but never packaged up. So some enterprising people managed to get their hands on this stock, slapped makeshift labels on the carts where needed, and sold them at an even more reduced rate than the box titles, as this old advert shows. So let's quickly move on to checking out the games, and as many were quick and dirty ports of classic CPC games, I wanted to find a few games that were either exclusive or had at least been updated to make use of the upgraded hardware, and I can tell you, it wasn't easy. Where else could we start but with the packing title Burning Rubber, which unsurprisingly is a racing game, and one that definitely looks better than anything we've seen previously on the CPC. It moves a little faster and there's some palette tricks going on that gives a really nice time of day effect. The tunnel and hill effects actually look pretty decent, but the sound effects really let it down. It's just not very nice at all. And to be honest, it feels a little boring to play. And what we have now is Navy SEALs, which plays like a run and gun style game, but with an emphasis on being sneaky and trying to get the drop on your gun-toting baddies, who unfairly seem to be able to shoot at an angle, and they hold their gun up high enough that it can actually shoot over boxes, where we have to actually jump to do that ourselves. There seems to be a range of weapons which will make your life a little bit easier, as the game is one-hit death, and so it does get a little tricky. But overall, it actually does a reasonable job of using the Plus hardware, and it's actually not a bad game at all. Let's check out another CPC cart exclusive game in the form of Robocop 2. The original Robocop game was a bit of a cult classic. This is even worse than the film that it's based on. Terrible controls, constant instant deaths, and a confusing tile work all add up to make this a real mess of a title. And when you die, it's back to the start of the level with you. All in all, it's just horrid to play, just not fun at all. It is simply only here because it does a really good job of showing off the hardware. Switchblade is our next title, and possibly got the least amount of upgrades of any of the games in this list. They added some extra colour work to the sky that gives it a nice fade effect, and they touched up some of the sprites and some of the text. But there's one thing that does set it apart from most of the other games: it's actually a lot of fun to play, as you travel around this large maze trying to find the various parts of some sword. I really do like the way the rooms build up on the screen, it's a nice trick. and let's end this with the cut from that brick of a case that we showed earlier, World of Sports, which is a sports compilation, who would have guessed it, that were really popular at the time, and consists of BMX racing, slalom skiing, surfing, and cliff diving. And on my first go I did so badly that I had to go check the booklet to work out how to play it. Though through my next couple of games I slowly started getting better, though I still have no real idea what you're meant to be doing during those surfing bits. When it hit the market, it launched at £99, which was the same price as the Nintendo Entertainment System and was actually even more expensive than the Sega Master System. And just to rub salt into the wounds, the Sega Mega Drive launched in the very same month. And even though it was more expensive, it, along with the Amiga and Atari ST, were helping to usher gamers into the 16-bit era. So a modestly upgraded CPC was never going to ignite the public interest. And that pretty much ended the CPC line. And this pretty much ends Amstrad month for this year. So until next time, I've been the Goldfish. That was a console with just 27 games, and this was Goldfish on Games. Goodbye. Thank you for watching my video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please consider giving it a thumbs up, or even better, subscribing. It all helps these small channels like mine grow. Otherwise, you can check out other videos that I've done with the links on the screen.